Right, hello family and friends, welcome back, welcome back. Okay, I've had my days of self-pity and wallowing and sulking done. This is what it's all about. The family puts out messages of encouragement and you take them on board and you just get straight back on track. So, today we're gonna go into what's really happening. Short memories. History repeats itself. The devices to work against you, devices to ruin the poor. Now, as you've known, I hinted at this many, many times, and I've been reluctant to read about Robespierre and the French Revolution because obviously what happened, I've been reluctant to read about it. But let's forget about the violence. What was he saying? You see, in this day and age, we like to think that these guys, these politicians, they speak our language. None of them speak in your language. They can't do what they should do because all bases are covered, basically. The government is powerless the way we think government is supposed to be, how it's supposed to work. The government is something else now. And it has been for a very, very, very long time. But what it's all been about is making sure you don't see, you don't understand, you don't know. You're bamboozled. You still trust. You're just caught in this vicious cycle, trapped in the system. Cognitive dissonance. But we're getting to that time in history, very important time in humanity, where we just noticing too much. Some people want to bury their heads in the sand. Some people are comfortable under the current system, so they don't really want change because they don't know what change means for them. People say they speak your language, but they don't. Nobody actually goes straight to the point, straight to the root cause, right for the disease. And all bases are covered, basically. And this man told us about this over 200 years ago. Short memories. People don't know history. What you can't know what you don't know. So, this is part one. I really want you to get this, so I'll split it into two parts. It's on the Silver Mark. The Silver Mark is basically about taxes. This is April 1791. And he's talking about the Silver Mark. Basically, the following speech was never delivered, but was printed and discussed in the popular societies. Robespierre is here opposing the distinction between passive and active citizens, whereby only those able to pay a contribution equivalent to 3 days' work were eligible to vote. Moreover, only those able to pay a high tax, that is, a silver mark, were eligible to run for election. Out of 7 million male citizens, 3 million were excluded and considered as passive. So out of 7 million males, 3 million didn't have enough to pay to become active citizens. They had no say. The Constitution of 1791 recognized this distinction, thus installing a qualified and restricted form of suffrage. So this is so super relevant, and so is part two. And I just love when I get the opportunity to read something which is so relevant and perfect timing. So I'm gonna go straight for the meat and just read an excerpt. What would the nation be? Enslaved? For liberty consists of obeying laws voluntarily adopted and servitude in being forced to submit to an outside will. What would your constitution be? A veritable aristocracy, for aristocracy is the state in which one portion of the citizens is sovereign and the rest subjects. And what an aristocracy! The most unbearable of all, that of the rich. All men born domiciled in France are members of the political society called the French nation. In other words, French citizens. That is what they are by nature of things and by the main principles of the law of nations. The rights attached to this title depend on their fortune each individual possesses, nor on the amount of taxation to which he is subject, because it is not tax that makes us citizens. The quality of citizen only obliges him to contribute to the common expenditure of the state according to his abilities. Now, you can give laws to citizens, but you cannot annihilate them. The supporters of the system I am attacking, see, this dude went straight for the jugular. And the best thing about this guy, yeah, when he went to government committees and gatherings, political gatherings, certain societies, and to the political debates, he went straight for the throat, and the people he was attacking were sat right opposite him, and he just let rip. The supporters of the system I am attacking have noticed this truth themselves, since, not daring to contrast the quality of citizens in the case of those they were disinheriting politically, they limited themselves to evading the principle of equality which it necessarily presupposes, by making a distinction between active citizens and passive citizens. Counting on the ease with which men are governed by words, they try to put us off the scent by proclaiming, in this new expression, the most manifest violation of the rights of man. But who could be so stupid as not to see that these words can neither change the principles nor resolve the difficulty, since declaring that such citizens would not be active, and saying that they will no longer exercise the rights attached to the title of citizen, amount to exactly the same thing in the idiom of these subtle politicians. Now I will now I will always ask them by what right they can thus strike their fellow citizens and constituents with inactivity and paralysis. I will not stop clamouring against the insidious and barbaric locution which will defile both our code and our language unless we hasten to erase it from both of them, in order that the word liberty does not itself become meaningless and derisory. What shall I add to such obvious truths? Nothing, for the benefit of the nation's representatives, whose opinions and wishes have already anticipated my demand. It just remains for me to answer the deplorable sophistries with which the prejudices and ambitions of a certain class of men strive to shore up the disastrous doctrine I am fighting. It is those men alone that I am now going to address. The people, folk who have nothing. The dangers of corruption. The example of England, of peoples supposed to be three. These are the arguments deployed against justice and reason. I ought only to answer with a word or two. The people, the multitude of men whose cause I am defending, have rights that come from the same origin as your own. Who gave you the power to take them away? General practicality, you say. But is there nothing practical in what is just and honest? And does not that external maxim apply above all to social organization? And if the purpose of society is the happiness of all, the conservation of the rights of man, what should we think of those who want to base it on the power of a few individuals and the degradation and hopelessness of the rest of the human race? What then are these sublime politicians who applaud themselves for their own genius, when by means of laborious subtleties they have at least managed to substitute their vain fantasies for the immutable principles graven in the hearts of all men by the eternal legislator? England, what good are they to you? England and its depraved constitution, which may have looked free to you when you had sunk to the lowest degree of servitude, but which it is high time to stop praising out of ignorance or habit. Free peoples, where are they? What does the history of those you honour with this name show you, other than aggregations of men more or less remote from the paths of reason and nature, more or less enslaved under governments established by chance, ambition, or force? So was it to copy slavishly the errors or injustices that have long degraded the human species that eternal providence called on you alone, since the world began, to re-establish on earth the empire of justice and liberty, in the heart of the brightest enlightenment ever to have illuminated public reason? Amid the almost miraculous circumstances Providence has been pleased to assemble, to supply you with the power to restore to mankind its original happiness, virtue, and dignity. Do you really feel the full weight of that sacred mission? Those who, in answer to our justified complaints, are content merely to say coolly, with all its faults, our Constitution is still the best that has ever existed. Was it then so that you might nonchalantly leave in that Constitution essential faults destructive of the basic foundations of the social order? That 26 millions of men put the formidable weight of their destinies in your hands? Would it not be said that the reform of a great number of abuses and several useful laws would be so many favours granted to the people, enough to make it necessary to do any more in its interests? No. All the good you have done was a rigorous duty. The omission of good which you can do would be a breach of trust. The harm you would be doing, a crime of lesser nation, of lesser humanity. All the good that you have done was a rigorous duty. The omission of good which you can do would be a breach of trust. The harm you would be doing, a crime of injured nation, of a wronged humanity. There is more. Unless you do everything for liberty, you have done nothing. There are no two ways of being free. One must be entirely free or become a slave once more. The least resource left to despotism will soon restore its power. The slightest moment we stop paying attention, we don't get what is right and what's just. We carry on with our daily lives. We look at the positives. We just carry on eating, drinking, and merry. We stop looking at the state. More people in unemployment. More people with ill health. The cost of living. We take our eye off the ball and leave the gates open, especially with political donations and all these things. The least resource left to despotism will soon restore its power. That's what's always happened. They wait you out and then they carry on again. They wait for you to come of age, have children, have families. Then you're not an activist no more. You're not in the fight. You're only concerned about your little circle. And in this day and age, they have lots of psychological things to distract you. You got the toys, you got the sex, drugs, and rock and roll, and you have the immigrant crisis, and of course, the unemployed, those on benefits, the working class, those on sickness. Always, constantly, round and round in circles. The least resource left to despotism will soon restore its power. What am I saying? It surrounds you already with its blandishments and its influence. Soon it could overwhelm you with its force. You are pleased to have attached your names to a great chance, but are not much concerned as to whether it is great enough to ensure human happiness. Make no mistake, the sound of the eulogies that astonishment and frivolity are causing to clamour about you will soon die. See, when people win elections, everyone's woo, everyone's waving banners, everybody's happy, but after a few years it's like, what's changed? And people are crying out again. It's the same old issues, decade after decade after decade, complaining about the same thing. You know, we say that all these news programs and panel shows, they're asking the big questions, but we're asking the same questions every 15, 20 years. It's just a vicious cycle, and we're glutton for punishment. Make no mistake, the sound of the eulogies that astonishment and frivolity are causing to clamour about you will soon die down. Posterity, comparing the greatness of our duties and the immensity of your resources with the fundamental flaws in your work, will say of you with indignation, they could have made men happy and free, but they did not want to. They were unworthy of it. But say you, the people who have nothing to lose, will then be able, like us, to exercise the rights of citizens. People have nothing to lose. How unjust and false is it in the eyes of truth, the language of delirious arrogance? The people of whom you speak are apparently men who live, who subsist in society, without the means to live and subsist. For if they are provided with those means they have, it seems to me, something to lose or to preserve. Yes, the rough garments that clothe me, the humble garret to which I purchased the right to withdraw and live in peace. Yes, the rough garments that clothe me, the humble garret to which I purchased the right to withdraw and live in peace. the modest wage which I feed my wife and my children, those things, I admit, are not lands, carriages, great houses. All of them amount to nothing, perhaps, to those accustomed to luxury and opulence. But they are something to ordinary humanity. They are sacred property beyond doubt, as sacred as the glittering domains of wealth. What am I saying? My liberty, my life, the right to obtain safety or vengeance for myself and my loved ones, the right to repel oppression, to exercise freely all the faculties of my mind and my heart, all these good things so sweet. The first of those that nature has allowed to mankind, are they not entrusted like yours to the guardianship of the law? And you say I have no interest in this law, and you want to strip me of the share that I should have, like you, in the administration of the state, for the sole reasons that you are richer than I am? Ah, if the balance stopped being equal, should it not tend to favor the less prosperous citizen? The law, the public authority, is it not established to protect weakness against injustice and oppression? It is thus an offence to all social principles to place it entirely in the hands of the rich. But the rich, the powerful, have reasoned differently. Through a strange abuse of words, they have restricted the general idea of property to certain objects only. They have called only themselves property owners. They have claimed that only property owners are worthy of the name of citizen. They have named their own particular interests the general interest. And to ensure the success of that claim, they have seized all social power. And we, human weakness, we who aspire to bring them back to principles of equality and justice, it is still on the basis of these absurd and cruel prejudices that we are seeking, without being aware of it, to raise our constitution. We rely on the system, the very system that's oppressing us, to give us justice, to stop oppression. It's bonkers, man. And the dude was telling us over 200 years ago. But what, after all, is this rare merit of paying a silver mark or some other tax which you attach such high prerogatives? If you give the public treasury a contribution more considerable than me, is it not for the reason that society has given you greater pecuniary advantages? And if we want to pursue this idea, what is the source of that extreme inequality of fortunes that concentrates all the wealth in a small number of hands? Does it not lie in bad laws, bad governments, and finally, all the faults of corrupt societies? Now, why should those who are victims of these abuses be punished again for their misfortune by losing the dignity of being citizens? I envy not all the advantageous share you have received, since this inequality is necessary or incurable evil. This inequality is a necessary or incurable evil, but at least do not take from me the imprescriptible property of which no human law can strip me. Indeed, allow me to be proud sometimes of an honorable poverty, and do not seek to humiliate me with the vainglorious pretension that the equality of sovereign is reserved for you, while I am left only with that of subject. But the people, the corruption, stop. I say stop profaning and touching the sacred name of the people by linking it with the idea of corruption. What is a person who, among men, equal in rights, dares to declare his fellows unworthy of exercising theirs, and to take them away for his own advantage? And surely, if you allow yourselves to base such a conviction on assumptions of corruptibility, what a terrible power you are assuming over humanity. Where will your prescriptions end? But is it really on those who do not pay the silver mark that they should fall? Or on those who pay much more? Yes, in spite of all your bias in favour of the virtues that wealth brings, I dare say that you would find them as much in the class of the least moneyed citizens as in that of the most opulent. Do you really believe, in all honesty, that a hard and laborious life produces more faults than softness, luxury, and ambition? And have you less faith in the probity of our artisans and ploughmen, who under your tariff will almost never be active citizens, than tax farmers, courtiers, those you used to call great lords, who under the same tariff would be active 600 times over? See, certain people get to have more say in our lives. And you hear all the voices, oh, but they're job creators. No. You've heard it all. Since this tax the rich thing is not going away and it keeps coming up, you hear all the little voices. Oh, but they might leave. I want one day to avenge those you call the people for those sacrilegious calumnies. I want one day to avenge the people for what these people slander ordinary citizens. We don't get to really hear these decisions they make, the way they talk about us, the way they say, but you can hear it in the certain citizens who parrot it. You hear them in society, on the news, on Question Time. So are you fit to appreciate the people and to know men? You who since reaching the age of reason has judged them only to be absurd ideas of despotism and feudal arrogance, you who accustomed to the bizarre jargon invented them, found it easy to denigrate the greater part of the human race with the words rabble and populace, you who have revealed to the world that there were people of no birth, as if all the men alive had not been born, as if there were not people risen from nothing, who were men of merit and gentlemen, respectable people who were the vilest and most corrupt of men. Oh, doubtless you can be permitted not to render the people of all the justice that is due to it. For myself, I call on those whom the instinct of a noble and sensitive soul has brought close to the people and made worthy to know and love equality. I want to say, I should have said it in my last video, I forgot to say it. I just want to appreciate what the Labour Party did this winter, helping people with their bills, helping people to stay warm, £150 off your electricity bill. I would have been screwed if it weren't for that. I appreciate these things. The first thing the Labour Party did when they came into power, they gave us 100 quid towards the cost of living. These things appreciate. You have to remember these things. But ever since the Labour Party has come into power, you've seen they're constantly under attack. What do you think that is? How do you think that is? Because they're trying to get those toffs back in Parliament. I call on all those whom the instinct of a noble and sensitive soul has brought close to the people and made worthy to know and love equality, to witness that in general there is nothing so just or so good as the people, at all times when it is not irritated by excessive oppression, that it is grateful for the most trivial considerations shown to it, the slightest good done to it, and even for the harm that is not done to it. That is among the people that we find beneath the exteriors that we call rough, candid, and upright souls, and a good sense and energy that one would seek long and in vain in the class that disdains it. That people ask only for what is necessary. It only wants justice and tranquility. The rich aspire to everything. They want to invade and dominate everything. Abuses are the work and the domain of the rich. They are the scourges of the people. The interest of the people is the general interest. That of the rich is a particular interest. And you want to nullify the people and render the rich all powerful. Am I to hear again those eternal accusations that I have been heaped continuously on it from the time when it was loosening the despot's yoke to the present? As if the entire people could be accused of a few specific and local acts of vengeance committed at the beginning of an unhoped for revolution, when, at least, breathing freely after such long oppression, it was in a state of war with all its tyrants. What am I saying? What time has ever given such dazzling proof of its natural goodness as the moment when, armed with irresistible force, it suddenly held back of its own will and calmed down at the request of its representatives? Oh, you who show yourselves so inexorable towards suffering humanity and so indulgent towards its oppressors. Look at the history. Glance around you. Count the crimes of the tyrants and judge between them and the people. What am I saying? From the very efforts the enemies of the revolution made to slander it to its representatives. From the very efforts the enemies of the revolution made to slander it to its representatives, to slander you to it, to suggest you measures designed to stifle its voice or drain its energy or mislead its patriotism. What did I say? Blame and distraction. Immigrants, unemployed, sickness, working class. You have to learn to avoid the racist trap. They know you better than they know yourselves. And it's been given you to distract you away from the masters, distract you away from the real problem. solutions that need problems. Don't look here, look there. They know you're looking for answers. If you want a hero, we'll give you a hero. Control both sides. When we all want the same thing. We all just want to live. You have to understand who's really robbing you. You have to understand who's in the shit with you. And you have to understand when it all goes to shit, who's going to be gone. And who's going to be in the shit with you. None of these people who claim to speak your language will be down at ground street level in the crap with you. Charlatans. Some of them are millionaires themselves. Some of them don't even live in this country. They tell you exactly what you want to hear. And they point to everything else, which leaves us pointing at each other. The piano doesn't kill the player. Without immigration, that piano comes right down on top of their heads. Because guess what? They only have their own people to blame. It's so effective. They never had that in these days. They never had that. And that's why revolutions, they went straight to the top. Because they knew it was them. There was nobody else to point to. They tried to point at the poor. But then everyone looked around and said, we're all the poor. And people were living in abundance and indulgence, and other people were suffering. So there was only one place to go. There was only one group to blame. What am I saying? From the very efforts the enemies of the revolution made to slander it to its representatives, to slander you to it, to suggest to you measures designed to stifle its voice, to drain its energy, or mislead its patriotism, to prolong the neglect of its rights by hiding your decrees from it, from the unfailing patience with which it has borne all its ills, while awaiting a happier order of things. We should understand that the people is the sole support of liberty. Who then could bear the idea of seeing it stripped of its rights by the very revolution which is due to its courage, to the tender and generous affection with which it defends its representatives? Is it to the rich? Is it to the great that you owe the glorious insurrection that saved France and saved you? The soldiers who laid down their arms at the feet of the alarmed homeland, were they not the people? And who led them against you? To what classes did they belong? Who sent the soldiers against you? You see, after a while, the soldiers, they laid down arms because they were like, we're fighting our own people. This is me. That's my mum. That's my brother. So eventually they laid down arms. You see what a big distraction a multicultural, a multiracial society is. How advantageous it is to these people. And those who led them against you, to what classes did they belong? So was it to help you defend its rights and its dignity that the people was then fighting? Or was it to give you the power to annihilate them? Was it only to fall under the yoke of the aristocracy of wealth that you joined it? You in breaking the yoke of the feudal aristocracy. So far I have accommodated myself to the language of those who seem to want to designate by the word people a separate class of men, to which they attach a certain idea of inferiority and contempt. It is time to speak with greater precision by recalling that the system we are opposing prescribes 9/10 of the nation, that it even removes from the list of those it calls active citizens a countless multitude of men whom even the prejudices of arrogance had respected. Men distinguished by their education, their industry, and even by their wealth. Such in effect is the nature of that institution that it leads people into the most absurd contradictions, and that taking wealth as the measure of a citizen's rights, it departs from its very rule by linking them with what are called direct taxes. Although it's obvious that a man who pays considerable indirect taxes may enjoy a bigger fortune than another who is only subject to a moderate tax. But how can anyone have thought of making the sacred rights of man depend on the mobility of financial systems, the variations, the motley forms that ours displays in different parts of the same state? What sort of system is it in which a man who is a citizen at one point on French territory ceases to be one, either in whole or in part, when he moves to some other point, or one who is a citizen today ceases to be one tomorrow if his fortune suffers a reverse? You could be rich one day and poor the next, and you're not a citizen. What sort of system is it in which a decent man robbed by an unjust oppressor falls back into the class of helots? Helots, back in the days, were Spartan slaves of the Spartans. What sort of system is it which a decent man robbed by an unjust oppressor falls back into the class of helots, while another is raising himself by crime to the rank of citizen? Scoundrels. Or a father watches a certainty grow along with the number of his children, that he will not be able to leave them this title with the small portion of their divided patrimony, or all the family of sons in half the empire can only find a homeland when they no longer find a father. What use, finally, is the superb prerogative of membership of the sovereign if the assessor of public contribution is in a position to take it away from me? By reducing my contribution by 1 sou, if it is subject both to the caprices of men and the inconsistency of fortune, and fix your attention, especially on the disastrous problem it must inevitably cause, and what powerful weapons it not make available to intrigue. Just imagine how the weapons they are using to fight against a new system, an equality system. You see, many people come into power thinking they can help the people, but they soon find out it's the exact opposite. Somebody has to be at the bottom. It's got to that point where you have to ask the question, if so many have too much, does that mean that few should have little? No. So many have too much, but the majority don't even have enough. Not even enough. People don't want charity. They're making charity a celebrity now. So it distracts the fact that we're being robbed, and then virtue signaling all the charity. So now people can go and say, oh, look at me, I'm doing this, I'm doing that, I'm a great person, I'm doing this, I'm doing that. People don't want charity. People need jobs. People want to look after themselves. This is just so much powerful stuff, man. Part 2 tomorrow.